for my business partner, Kevin Cossey, who's the audio engineer extraordinaire. He and I create these recordings, but Eben was the catalyst because he thought these recordings that we had up until that point only recorded for ourselves, he wanted them to be available to others. And that's when we entered this kind of shared devotion to helping others generate these same kinds of personal experiences so they can come to the same understandings in their lives.
You know, I know it's going to seem like going backwards here because I'm I'm a nerd. I'm science-based originally and then became, of course, a channeler later. That was a transformation. And I want to hit hard on something because I'm standing and sitting and talking to you right in front of somebody who has experienced this very, very profoundly. And that is this. Science tells us, and you've already said it, this is a repeat, but I want to hear it again. Science tells us that on death, the brain will create delusional things as a help so that you can die without panic or die perhaps better. In other words, it's chemistry. And that is exactly wrong. And that we have always said, no, it isn't. You know, the brain, the soul is everything. That's the primal source, and it inhabits the body for a while and moves on or whatever. Actually, Kryon says it is in both places at once. Our soul is in us at the same time we are in us, but the soul is the driver. Now, would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think this basically evolving awareness of the mind-brain relationship and the deep nature of consciousness and conscious awareness investigated in a scientific fashion, in very rigorous investigation by experts in these phenomena, and then the theoretical work to explain how it can all happen. I think that work is making tremendous progress. And from my point of view, I think our book, Living in a Mindful Universe, does a very kind of thorough job of introducing people to the unification of science and spirituality in the modern era through this primacy of consciousness. But also we work with many scientific groups, and that includes the group at University of Virginia, Division of Perceptual Studies. And I will simply say for the scientific community, if you want to see the tremendous progress in this field, just look at the 3 books edited by Ed Kelly, beginning in 2007 with Irreducible Mind, which many people have read and realized was absolutely revolutionary, but that was just the beginning. He edited a follow-up book called Beyond Physicalism in 2015, which took all of this discussion much further along the pathway towards explaining this primacy of mind and how it works in this universe. And then finally, his book Consciousness Unbound, edited by Ed Kelly, came out in spring of 2021. And that goes even further towards elaborating this kind of scientific vision of the brain as a filter, of the kind of mind as primordial in the universe,
and I think idealism
ultimately, and then it gets to definitions of kind of consciousness and God and all that. But I think idealism is just admitting that there is, this important top-down causal layer of information integration and assimilation in the universe that some might call the mental universe. That's been well described, for example, in quantum physics from various people like Richard Kahn Henry.
But he also calls it a spiritual and mental universe, which I think is really important.
In his essay in the scientific journal Nature in 2005, Richard Kahn Henry, who was in physics at Johns Hopkins at the time, makes it very clear that from a quantum physics perspective, the universe is primarily mental and spiritual, not physical. And that's really where all of this is headed. That's where we headed in Living in a Mindful Universe. Absolutely the direction in which Ed Kelly and his 3 fascinating books has gone. And again, as Karen points out, then it starts to get into your definitions of kind of mind and God, where you're kind of defining this oneness with the divine, so often described by near-death experiencers. And really, all of us as sentient beings can come to the same knowing through meditation, through centering prayer. We all have ways of going within to connect. As you've been doing, Lee, in many decades of your life, connecting very actively and practically with the other side. And yet what we would say is, based on our workshops and our work and books, and that we think that anyone, any conscious being who has an interest in doing this can pursue this kind of deep integration of relationship with that primordial mind.
Kryon has said for 30 years that there's a song playing all of the time And that when we pass over, or sometimes you don't even have to pass over, when you go to that place which is your soul, you hear it. And that it's the song of home. And that it's the most splendorous thing you've ever heard, and it soothes your heart. Do you feel that you experienced any of that?
Every bit of that. In fact, that was one of the things that was so important to clarify early on, and I did, in my presentations in the book Proof of Heaven, talk about what a personal spiritual home it is. It's so comforting. People hear these descriptions and they think, "Oh, that sounds foreign or dreamy," or it sounds like something maybe foreboding. And yet every bit of my experience was extremely endearing and kind of heartening and connecting. And that, I think, is the important thing. And it's why people should take the time to go into meditation and centering prayer in this lifetime to connect more fully with that aspect of themselves, their greater connection to the universe. So it won't be such a shock when they leave their physical body once and for all at bodily death. It's worth, I often say that the most important lessons that come out of the study of near-death experiences, it's not what happens when I die, but how do I make choices today in dealing with myself and others that best reflect who I truly am based on this broad experience that we have called life. And we realize the materialist model is no longer adequate, and there's a much richer way of sensing this connection, this power of love to connect us all.
Absolutely beautiful. And I think that's why, Karen, I loved when you have in your description that you focus on heart-based consciousness. So can you just share with us a little more of that verbiage, heart-based consciousness, and what that means to you?
Well, one of the tools that I used to help me learn to meditate was sound, but another very significant one was a technique I learned through some Sufi taught teachers that they call heart rhythm meditation. And at its most simplest, it asks you to imagine that your breath is moving in and out of your heart. And once you do that, at the same time generating, say, feelings of gratitude, then you realize this is the seat of who we really are. When you can remove your awareness from those racing thoughts, conversations you want to have, the voice in your head that tells you're not good enough or you're not, all of those things. When you can move away from that and feel your way through life, then everything changes. And I would say that there's a difference in the way that you can experience love. I know I have. One is from a sort of an intellectual standpoint, where you make a decision based on practical realities that, yes, I love this person is nice, and, I love this person, I want to be with this person. But another kind of love is not intellectual at all. It is a feeling that you get. It feels like a warmth. It usually is involved with connection to another person. Much like I had when I first met Eben, when I first met Ram Dass, I had a very similar kind of feeling in my heart. But I've also experienced it with animals, with whales, with dogs. I've experienced it with plants, with trees. Yeah. You can really make a connection to anything without words. In fact, when I took a bunch of courses in animal communication, they always said, ask from your heart. So all of this direction made me realize how critical the heart was. And the research of heart math only confirmed all of it, that our hearts are emitting an electromagnetic field that is based on our emotional state. And that seems to affect others around us. And that is, to me, the ultimate golden rule, is to really have awareness of what's going on in your heart. I know when I first started doing the heart rhythm meditation, I found a lot of hurt and pain and loneliness that I didn't know I had. Once I cleared that out, then my heart was filled with my true essence, the part that knows I'm important, and we all are important. Every soul is critical on this earth because we're all connected to one consciousness. And so when Eben often says we have one mind, I'll say, no, we have one heart, or one spirit. That's how we connect. And this term that some scientists, open-minded scientists, often say, and Eben included, mind over matter. I like to say, well, it's spirit over matter, because mind is where we think those are our thoughts. And it's really beyond our thoughts that the connection to spirit happens. And we get there, I think, very efficiently through the heart. And so that's where we definitely connected that way, and how I try to explain the heart of consciousness.
I think that was a great definition, and I love the interplay between it's the one mind, no, it's the one heart. And recently we had a guest on our program also doing heart math that helped her in her process, Paula Connor, and she spoke about the longest journey you ever take is from your brain or your mind to your heart. Now, Evan, you did it in such a dramatic way. Going from your brain. The
only way he would have ever been convinced, by the way.
Exactly.
That is true, but I think witnessing my own kind of struggle with how to present this to the world over the last 13 and a half years since it all happened, Karen clearly played a tremendous role, and I would say meeting her 3 years after my coma, when we were both very interested in how differential frequency sounds could be very powerful at shifting things in the brainstem and setting our consciousness free. I mean, that was one of the biggest gifts, and realizing Karen had lived her whole life as an idealist, which I was just beginning to realize was the correct answer. But then that constant reminder, as this neurosurgeon, I would keep getting up in my head about it all, and that beautiful, gentle reminder from Karen about heart consciousness.
Well, the way this hit you,
beautiful.
The way this hit him personally is that I asked him at one point, because I often ask people this, do you love yourself? And I thought, he's been on the other side, he's experienced this amazing love and describes it so beautifully. And I said, well, do you love yourself? And he said, no, I don't. He thought about it, actually, and it had to do with the fact he was adopted. And so from a pre-speaking age, he was rejected by his mother, who did love him but couldn't keep him. And that was taken away from him. And so through his whole life, he carried that. And it was after his near-death experience where he was told, you are deeply loved and cherished forever. This is what he tells people, but he didn't know it himself. And now you do.
I do.
You through that process
and a lot
of
of it has come through meditation. It clearly involved that NDE as a catalyst, but people need to realize that just having an NDE, you're going to spend the rest of your life unpackaging the whole thing. It's not like all of a sudden you understand the whole world. You understand it's much bigger than you ever thought before, but that doesn't mean that you've fully assimilated the experience. And I'm still in the process of assimilating that experience and growing through it and helping the scientific community as best I can because of my position in understanding the science and also having had an experience of extraordinary depth into the spiritual realm.
Tell us about sacred acoustics a little more in audio meditations, and I'm very interested as an audio engineer about that.
Well, they're basically created with a foundation of what we call binaural beats, and that's where you have one sound in one ear, a slightly different sound in the other ear, and that creates, the brain translates that into sort of a wah, 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 steady sound. And they're programmed very deliberately to entrain the brain to lower states of awareness, say associated with delta, theta, alpha, as opposed to beta, the state that we're in when we're walking around. So any frequencies that are below 12 hertz are outside that beta range. But since we can't hear below 12 hertz, these binaural beats create that sound for us. Usually we're hovering around that 4 hertz realm, which is the border between awake and asleep. And when people listen to around 4 hertz, they often get into what we call a hypnagogic state, where the body is profoundly relaxed, but the mind is still aware. And this is where the magic happens. Using your intention, you can go on journeys, you can communicate with departed loved ones, you can connect with your higher self, I hate to say expanded self. But at its basic foundation, we did a pilot study where a psychiatrist in New York City did a study within her practice and found over a 2-week period of listening to recordings and listening protocols that I provided, a 26% reduction in anxiety was noted. Wow. And so just by listening to these recordings, people were able to reduce their anxiety by a highly significant amount. The control group in this setting, who received therapy but not the sound, had only a 7% reduction in anxiety over that same time period. So people use them to help themselves sleep, help get better focus, get in touch with their intuition, and then a little more exotic spiritual travels sometimes. So that's what they are used for, and sacredacoustics.com has a free 20-minute download that people can get, but just by putting in their email. But also, the Whole Mind Bundle are the exact set of recordings used in that pilot study, and we invite anyone to come and download those, because we know that as each of us reduces our anxiety, that it's helping all of us. And so that's why when the COVID pandemic first started, I reduced the price significantly, but there's also a free option. And that's the one I'm trying to stress here, is that these are accessible for anyone. And the best way to find out how they affect you is to try it yourself.
Listen through headphones.
Listen through headphones is very important, because then you get those binaural beats. And I want to point out that most of us are familiar with brass bowls or crystal bowls or tuning forks, gongs. All of those instruments emit that wah, wah sound, although there's a lot of natural harmonics that take place. But those same instruments are emitting natural binaural beats. Yeah. So we all can benefit from these, with or without these binaural beat recordings.
I would just add that a peer-reviewed pilot study was by Dr. Anna Yusim, Y-U-S-I-M, and it came out in Journal of Nervous and Mental Diseases in February of 2021.
That is brilliant. People, I want to remind you to go to sacredacoustics.com. That's where you're going to get the free offer. I think there needs to be a caution or warning on there. Warning the side effects may produce states of bliss.
And coherence.
Warning.
Well, we do have a warning, which is don't listen and drive. Because,
right. Don't listen and think much.
But you might relax a little too much. So.
Absolutely. And then I do want to talk about Eben's website, because Lee's a big fan. You have the Proof of Heaven in your office,
yes,
right?
I do.
Yeah, it's one of your favorite books.
Yep.
And you can go to ebenalexander.com so that you can also have a look at that website, and there's a free offer on there as well for our beautiful community. Right. We are almost out of time, so I want to just throw it back to the two of you. Any last things that you want to impart to our community?
I think I would just like to stress something Karen said a little while ago. Every soul is involved in this awakening. We often like to say, no soul left behind. And really, this is a time of, I would say, a confluence of more than 5,000 years of human history in terms of moving to a next level. And that is something that all of us can participate in. And even though the world may look frighteningly polarized and fractured in this moment, a lot of that is kind of fundamentalists reacting to realizing that some of the old ways of thought that have been so damaging to our world are something humanity is about to leave behind. And it's that kind of threat of extinction that lets so many people kind of scream out. And yet the reality is there's good reason to be optimistic about where we're headed on all this. And that's what Karen and I talk about in all of our webinars and talks and books. And it's a very promising future that we see for humanity.
And it's true. Each and every one of us is critical in this process. So anyone who's listening, if you're already a regular meditator, bravo, go deeper. If you're not, start some kind of personal practice. It can be movement, it can be walking in nature, it can be, using our sound, any form of meditation. Start somewhere. Start generating that personal experience. You will find it in your heart. That's where the answers lie. That is your connection to your inner world and your connection to that greater consciousness that we are all a part of. It's really our birthright to understand and experience this while we're here in these bodies.